Welcome to another episode of the Tapestry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Froswá Drew, and this is a podcast designed to bring in phenomenal women that share their stories. I believe there's so much we can learn from one another's narratives, and there's so much wisdom that I believe we can glean from each other's experiences. And so today I have another amazing guest that I want to introduce to you. And I am going to read her bio. I can't wait to get into the meat of the conversation. But let me introduce you to the amazing Kelli King Jackson. Kelli King Jackson is a coach and strategic advisor committed to freedom for Black folks. As a coach, she prioritizes working with Black women and other women of color, leading in white spaces. In her consulting work, she works to make the nonprofit, philanthropic, government, and corporate sectors safer for Black women. She is an ACC level coach with the International Coaching Federation and a 2164 certified philanthropy advisor. She has worked in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years. Most recently, she was the vice president of programs and community engagement at the Simmons Foundation in Houston, Texas. Prior to joining the foundation, she led a nationally recognized school-based health outreach initiative in Texas and consulted with BIPOC-led small nonprofits across the country. Kelli is actively engaged in her local community, often hosting discussions on upcoming elections, leadership, and ways to support local Black-led organizations. She is a speaker, avid writer, and occasional crafter. Welcome to the show, Kelli.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
So my first question to you is, how did you get into philanthropy? Because what I've noticed, there are very few Black women who are in philanthropic spaces. And at the level that you were in that space, it's even fewer. So talk about, how did you arrive into philanthropy and what was the journey like for you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. An accident. I was minding my own business, working at Children's Defense Fund here in Houston, Texas, and loving my work at community, deeply engaged in health outreach work, and really had no understanding really of what philanthropy was in the kind of the mainstream way that we think of philanthropy. I've been voluntold to write grants like many leaders in smaller nonprofits. So I knew the experience of writing a grant, but I had no idea what happened after a submission. And through my network, someone had shared with me an opportunity to apply for the Simmons Foundation. And at first I really was like, why would I do that? I'm in a place that I love, with people that I love, doing work that I love. Like, there's no reason for me to leave this. And with some nudging, I was like, I'll go ahead and apply and get on this interview. And I was like, oh, there's a thing here. And the thing is money and power. And until we understand what this code is, we're always going to be playing catch up. And so I decided at that first interview that I really wanted the job. And I wanted the job because I would be able to be in a foundation position, but also stay connected to community. So fast forward 10 years, I was at the foundation and really saw the importance of folks in our community, seeing Black folks in these positions and having influence over funding recommendations. It gave me opportunities on a national level to sit at funding tables, to be with other funders. And it was a real eye-opening experience to me on how money moves in our community.
You were so welcoming to me when I got in the space at the state fair, because it was one of those things that I fell into. I had always wanted to be in philanthropy, but I never saw a door open. And it was always watching people get into the CRA space. But I never could figure out how to get into, the foundation world. And it seemed like the same people were getting recycled for those positions. And you would never find out when an opportunity was open until they filled it. And so you're like, oh my God, that was open? And so to see you as a role model who had been there, and how welcoming and warm you have been to me and so many others in that space, you're absolutely right. It was one of those things for me about the power and watching how money moves, and also seeing how many organizations in our community were not having access to those resources, but expected to do all of this work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you said, you find out about an opportunity after. I tell folks that, philanthropy is a made up industry, right? Like many others. But the rules are hard to put your finger on because there really are not a lot of rules, right? So the IRS has very few rules for foundations. And so they have a lot of latitude to change how they do things, why they do things, when they do things. And quite frankly, when I was hired, I was told that my job as a program officer is often considered a golden handcuff. And basically what that means is you get into this role and you're not going to leave, right? Why would you leave?
I heard that a lot too, Kelli. It's true.
Yeah. And so I had to be very intentional that was not going to be me, right? I didn't want to be in this role for 20 years and not make space for other leaders. I didn't want to be in philanthropy and not open doors for other folks who wanted to be in this industry to have the opportunity. So my personal mission is to demystify all the smoke and mirrors that happen in this industry, because if we really want equity in our communities, we're going to have to really deconstruct what philanthropy has become and what it can be for the future.
And so you walked away. Both of us have walked away from those positions that people would have said, oh my goodness, why would you leave, the ability to give out money and get invited to all the chicken dinners and the galas and you go to all the things, and to walk away from that. You saw a lot in that space. Talk about some of the things that you saw as a Black woman that led you to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, I tell folks I would never have stayed in philanthropy if I didn't have a coach. I did a fellowship very early on in my career, and what it gave me was community and that coach. And those two things allowed me to really get clear on not just anchoring to my why, but be clear on the impact that I wanted to have. And so when I think about what stepping away was going to mean, it was to take the knowledge and the experiences that I had and to support other leaders who may be feeling isolation, who may be the only ones, who may be grappling with this thing some call imposter syndrome, and to really decide who they want to be as a leader, and have that level of clarity, even though the microaggressions are going to swirl around you, the aggressive aggressions are going to swirl around you. People are going to say toxic things to you. The paternalism and maternalism will be there, but you can stand firm and clear on why you are there and what your purpose to do. And a coach helped me to do that. And it is my personal commitment to do that for other Black women in leadership.
So let's talk about the coaching practice that you have. What can folks expect when they have an experience with Kelli as the coach? What do you typically do with people, and especially people that are in these toxic work environments? Because you and I both know people, we've experienced it ourselves. But how do you help them be able to maintain identity and still have sanity?
Yeah. I think the first thing I give for clients is a knowing. And the deep sigh of relief folks take when they realize they don't have to explain certain things to me. And we can move all that out of the way and really get to the heart of the matter, right? So as a coach, I can ask you, what was that experience like for you as a Black woman? I can ask a question, how might your identity as a Southern Black woman impacted that experience. And so my questions even can center who they say that they are, right? Because I don't assume how folks think about their Blackness, their gender, their class. We talk about that in our process of learning each other in our coaching. And I think the other thing that I give is I don't have to coach someone that to be successful in this role, you have to move like a white man. Right. I remember being told I needed to have a white woman coach. I remember being told, you have to sit at this position at the table to be taken seriously, or you have to do posture in this way to be seen and heard. And that wasn't authentic for me. And so I take very passionately the opportunity as a coach to create the safety needed for folks to decide, what keeps me safe in this space, right? We're going to explore that. And they can be in choice about how they want to show up, right? Because some places aren't safe, but we can't walk away because we're supporting family members, right? The Black tax is real. We have student loans, right? So just to tell someone to quit their job, right? That's not my role as a coach, and it's not that easy, right? But I can help you as a coach have a strategy on how to stay safe and to have an impact in the place that you are.
Kelli, there's this article that is in Harvard Business Review where they talk about the imposter syndrome and that it really isn't an imposter syndrome, that it is the systems and structures that we are in that make us feel as if we're imposters. And for so many of us in these spaces, I see a lot of women who question their worth and who are saying, well, can I do this? And they have the credentials. You even hear women when they're applying for jobs, they will have 90%. I've done it in the past. I'd have 90% of the, qualifications and then go, well, I don't have a 10, so maybe I shouldn't do it. And I've had white male friends who said they had 30% and applied and said, I can learn the rest of it. Talk about those systems that create for so many of us this ideal of, and you mentioned a little bit about this imposter syndrome. How does that work, especially in these nonprofit and philanthropic spaces of feeling like you don't belong and fit?
Yeah. I mean, I call imposter syndrome a myth because these spaces we're in were never designed for us, right? So I'm not an imposter, but I am here to disrupt and change, right?
Right.
And so we're in spaces not designed for us, but we are the future of this country. And so these spaces must change if they're going to be successful and relevant to the constituency that is in that, 15 to 30, right, year old who will be our future workforce, our future leaders of these companies. And so I feel like it gives us a competitive advantage, right? Yes. Because we know the experience, we know the interest, we know the culture, we know the language. And so how do we think of our difference as a strength and an asset to help teams that are in that kind of old school mentality to be able to be competitive, right, for clients, for partners, whatever that might be for the future. And so I'm working right now on a guided meditation around it because it really does hold some people back. We do some internal family systems work where we explore the parts of ourselves and when we first felt like an imposter and how do we embrace that younger part of ourselves. We call upon ancestors in coaching, right? What ancestors can guide us, right? As a literal and spiritual mentor as we think about being in these spaces. And so what I love about coaching as a Black woman is that my culture and my way of being, my way of speaking, my presence is free in that space, right? It is welcome. And then I really do believe it helps other leaders to feel that confidence so that idea of an imposter can be transformed into the asset that it is.
And so, Kelli, I'm curious, you've done this amazing body of work in philanthropy. You're doing coaching now. What does next look like for you?
Next, like many Gen Xers raised by baby boomers, is to master rest
I want to talk about that. Let's unpack that. What do you mean, master rest?
Rest is a foreign concept to many of us, particularly if you were the first and or the only in a lot of spaces that you've been, whether that is your education, your career, even in your family, right? And so I think for a long time, there was this pressure to show up for other people, right? Because my family's counting on my community is counting on me. And so there was always kind of this more. And quite frankly, I hit a wall when George was murdered on live TV. And I saw the industry that I had spent almost 10 years in, that it really wasn't ready to transform itself and be responsive to what the people were asking for. I then started planning my exit. I no longer saw it as a badge of honor that I was on 10 committees, right? I no longer saw it as a badge of honor that I was sleeping 4 hours a night, and really have been kind of deconstructing productivity, deconstructing impact and the cost, and what is my work to do. And that as a leader, and I think the transformative, inclusive leadership of the future requires folks to make space for other leaders, right? So I don't have to be the only one who's on the panel, right? I don't have to be the only one who's invited to do the thing. Not only does that give me space to rest, it also allows me to lift up and champion other leaders and give them that opportunity to lead out front. And so if I can master rest, which I am fast approaching 50, I really, want to lean more into travel, speaking internationally, really exploring more creativity in my work, which is hard for an oldest child Capricorn to do. But it is like my next aspiration, professionally and personally.
You make me think about the book that I'm starting to delve into. The Rest is Resistance.
Yes.
And thinking about these systems that we are a part of and we've adopted, and that we've made it normal to kill ourselves, that this grind culture is actually killing ourselves, and hearing young people say things like, I can rest when I die. It's like, really? You're going to do that much sooner if you keep this up. You'll get a whole lot of rest because your body is not designed to keep doing this. And it's fascinating how so many of us have bought into this idea of my value is tied to all of this stuff. And it is having boomers. For those of us who are, I'm a little bit older than you, who are having, who have boomer parents, that workaholic culture.
And, to their credit, they had something to prove, right?
They did.
They were truly the first.
Yes, they had to.
I remember making fun of my mom. We called it her white lady voice. There was a tone when she answered the phone. That why are you doing that, right? And so I know that some of the performance was a necessity, right? And so for us of our generation is to remind ourselves, yes, the world still has work to do, but there's certain things we don't have to do anymore. We can make a different choice. It doesn't mean there may not be a cost, right? But the cost may be worth it because the return is greater. And that's really, I think, a gift to our parents, right? That my ancestors actually probably didn't want me to have to labor in the ways that they did. And so this is their reward, right? That I get the opportunity to take vacations and travel the world and put their mark in places that they never had an opportunity to visit.
So a couple of things come out for me when you're talking. Spirituality sounds like it is such a part of your work. And then the other piece is legacy. So talk a bit about both of those and how they are centered in who you are. So I'm the genealogist of my generation. So those
two things are deeply embedded in my family. So my great grandparents are from Louisiana, not too far from where I live in Houston, and were ministers. And they were ministers and considered pretty radical. They were Pentecostal, worshiping with white folks in the South in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Fascinating, starting to really delve into their journey. And so, their spirituality and their faith is deeply embedded in me. Now, we may not have the same theology, but the fact that spirit ushers us into our path and the impact that we leave behind is definitely a part of my life. And when I think about my work, I think it is a spiritual work because I really believe our ancestors are present and active in this realm. And then when I think about legacy, this is their legacy, right? My passion to find documentation, particularly around my great grandmothers, because women were so invisible, particularly if they didn't work a traditional job. But really tracking their leadership has become something that's really important to me because I am their legacy, and my desire is to leave a legacy for my grandchildren to be able to know where they come from, right? To be able to know the impact that we were having generations before they were here.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about too, what is it that we leave for young women? Because you talk about what they've deposited in you. And I'm thinking about, right now it's the conversation around Tyler Perry and the comments. You've heard about the comments. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that. But it makes me think about the deposits that we have to give to young women and the importance of us showing up and mentoring and pouring into them. And I love how you talk about creating spaces for other people to show up. And that is so important. That's part of legacy too. And the fact that you are recognizing this legacy of these people you never met that came before you that are still there with you. And yet this legacy that you're building for yourself in terms of this rest piece and going, I want to be able to enjoy my life and have something left over. And yet I want to create space for other people. I don't know if many of us are so intentional about that and making sure that younger folks are brought into that. And you do that well, where you bring younger people in.
I'm trying. What I love about young people is sometimes their critique of us can be hard and feel hard.
Yes.
But I love that they aspire to a level of freedom and creativity that I probably couldn't have imagined, right? If I hadn't raised millennial children, I probably never would have left a day job, right? I'd always consulted on the side, but the idea that, wait a minute, I can't work for myself and actually eat at the same time and do, right? That's attainable for me. And so I get a lot of inspiration from young people. Yes, I believe there's wisdom that we bring into their space, but I do believe that the possibility and the hope that they bring is something that sometimes we lose practice of. And I want to continue to practice hope. I want to continue to practice possibility and radical possibility. I want to work a 3-day work week and make the same amount of money that I make. I know people who've done it, and I'm holding for myself that it's possible, right? That's the type of life that I think that I can live, and that being in community with young people really affords.
And that's what made me think about it, because with the Tyler Perry situation, I'm listening to these young women and I'm intrigued by their voices of saying, I don't accept this. And when I look at generations previously, your comment earlier about, well, folks had to do what they had to do. And to see this generation that doesn't have to do it can say, I'm not doing that. I don't want to work, 5 days a week. I don't like this job. I'm going. And to hear these young women say, I don't accept that. That is unacceptable. He's going to have to bring more than money for a light bill and dinner every once in a while. Was just for me. Yes. What did you think when you heard that?
it's a level of courage I don't think we all have, right? Like, I'm like, I'm not sure, right? I used to say this, I used to tell him when I was just friends with my husband, I'll marry a gas station attendant if he treats me well, right? And young people today will say that's a very low bar, right? And there's the reality that they live in an economy where there's a quality of life that they want to maintain. And I'm not mad at it, right? They get to be in choice about the life that they want to live. And so I think that, the mistakes that we make, as I call ourselves baby elders, is we are out here offering opinions that nobody asked us about, right? Tyler can speak to his own experience, but I don't think anybody asked Tyler what he thought about the dating pool for young people. So I'll just leave that there.
Well, and what it did for me was help me understand as we get older how we have to be careful of being disconnected. Because what he demonstrated was you can get so disconnected by your wealth and by your experiences that you don't even see what's going on, that you can be so tone deaf. And there was a time when people would go, because I remember saying that if they have potential, then that's okay. And what I've learned with that now that I'm a baby elder, that potential means you might do it and you might not. And so now I'm going, no, potential is not what you want. But he demonstrates that we have to be very careful when we allow our environments to become so small that we are not aware of what's going on around us. And we give advice that does not have any relevancy to the very people that we think is helping.
Yeah. I mean, I think that my mother's push for education, I don't think she ever intended it to cause harm. But one thing I've realized is it has caused a class division in my family. I've had experiences and exposure to things and resources and a level of privilege that everyone in my family doesn't have. Right. And that can cause a disconnect if I am not intentional about maintaining those relationships, not from the perspective of I have something to teach or something to give, but that we are in community and relationship together. And I think as Black people, we need to interrogate our privilege and how we show up when we get that privilege, because otherwise it can run amok really quickly and cause a lot of division and harm.
Yes. So what can we do to be able to deal with the traumas? Another thing I'm watching is the Kirk Franklin story. And that just did something to me. And the comment that he made about, and I'm paraphrasing, about what is it like to not be broken?
Yeah.
What would it look like to be normal? And I was talking to my mother about how traumatized we have been, and then daily being re-triggered. In your work as a coach, how do you help people deal with this trauma? Not only this cultural DNA that we carry from ancestors of the trauma that they experienced, but the stuff that we're having to deal with every single day. How do you help? And what's your advice for folks to be able to manage, or even for me, bigger than that, get through it and get to the other side?
Yeah. I'm not great with somatic work, but the idea that we need to learn how to tap back in to our full bodies, right? What capitalism, what whiteness, what privilege do, and what it privileges is kind of this head way of being, right? Our thinking, our rationale, our strategy. And often what we do is we disconnect from the rest of our bodies and how it's being impacted by the things that we experience. So one of the offerings in coaching is to hold curiosity about helping people move from that headspace back into the fullness of who they are. And, I tell folks, we're watching for numbing behaviors, right? The therapist might call it disassociation. Right. But we just casually will call it check out. Where do you go when you check out? right? Is it your online shopping? Is it your wine? Is it your snacks? If you were to tap back in, what's happening in your body when you think about engaging with your supervisor? When you think about going to, that family event? When you think about your leadership and the impact it's having on your team, what is happening in your body, right? And there'll be curiosity. My stomach is starting to have butterflies, or my heart is beating really quickly, right? And so giving the opportunity and the invitation for folks to lead with all of themselves, not just with their heads.
Kelli, how can folks find you? If they want you as a coach, they want to get in contact with you, how do they find you? And tell us about your social media handles as well, so they can get to you any way possible.
Yes. The best way to find me is my website, which is www.iamkelli.com. And I am very active on LinkedIn. So just search Kelli King Jackson and I should pop up.
You are simply brilliant. And I am honored to be able to have a conversation with you. This could have gone on for hours because I had so many topics that I would love to delve into with you. So I'm going to have to figure out how to get you back. But I just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for being a person who is willing to grab folks and give them the support that they need in some of the most difficult situations that they experience in the workplace. And so I just appreciate you for being you and the love that you give to support so many. And so thank you, Kelli. And so, audience, please reach out to Kelli. She is amazing, as you witnessed. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Tapestry podcast. Again, I'm your host, Dr. Froswá Booker Drew. And I want to definitely say thank you to ISP Creative, because y'all, they make this happen. See you soon.